Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Live for Tax Day, April 15th of 2024. For me, I actually filed an extension, so I haven't done my taxes yet. I'm in the process of doing them, but I think I would have, I'd like to think that I would have had them done had I not gone up and seen my dad. But unfortunately, I left all my, not thinking. I didn't take my tax info with me. So it made it a little difficult to do the taxes while I was there. And then I got back here and just so much going on. So I filed an extension at the end of, or the beginning of last week. So now I have more time. For all of you who did not file extensions and you didn't get your taxes done by the end of today, well, it's been nice knowing you, and maybe you'll be able to access Unfound one way or the other while you're in jail. So anyway, but I hope everybody had a great week. Of course, I was just texting back and forth with my brother, Brian. I was like asking him, where did the week go? Of course, a week ago, I was coming to you from Palm Bay, Florida, in my brother's RV, and I thought that went pretty well. I really thought that, the audio and video were pretty good, and the connection was pretty good, and I was doing it off my tablet and everything. I guess that is a backup plan for someone for some time somewhere down the line, should be lacking maybe with some technology here or there. We'll just have to see. But I had tested it out the day before I left, just doing some samples using my tablet, and it just pretty much went as I thought it would go. So that was a week ago. I just don't know where the time goes. I really don't. So I got a fantastic show lined up for you tonight. I'm going to do a follow-up from a story I talked about last week that I got wrong. I'm going to have to spend a little time on OJ Simpson. Of course, he died of cancer just a few days ago, and I don't know how much, but it is interesting thinking about what would have happened had that entire murder case happened in the internet, true crime, social media era, right? So I have some things to say about that. I want to talk about this very, very weird story coming out of Washburn, Maine, about this cop who lied or maybe told the truth about picking up a missing man named Eric Foote, Foote. I want to try to get to a story about a young woman who went missing in LA. It seems like she's been found, but I want to do a little bit of analysis of that. So we got a lot to cover in the next hour and 56 minutes. Of course, what do I tell all of you? You got to give this a thumbs up. You got to give this production a thumbs up every Monday night. If you are here, you got to give it a thumbs up. You got to like it. All right. So please do that as you are watching tonight. As you can see on the screen here, why don't you think about becoming a Patreon member? Consider supporting. I know a lot of you, all of you, of course, are, if you're tuning in, making time on a Monday night, I know you're big time followers of Unfound. So you should be supporting Unfound if you can through Patreon or PayPal, or right here on YouTube with the little super chat button, which is down there, the little square surrounded by the $sign. or you can join, of course, the YouTube channel as well and get some things that other people do not get. But right now, foremost in your mind, hitting that thumbs up button. If you're not yet a subscriber to this channel, please do so. And of course, hit the little bell button. So you, of course, as a podcast, we sure do post a lot of videos on this channel. So you might want to know about all of that. So let's see who is in here. Lisa, it seems. Gosh, she was in here a half hour early. I see, Lisa. That's what we really call schmoozing up to the teacher. Lisa, good to see you tonight. Lisa, yes, you are first. And then thank you. You're very generous, Lisa. And yes, I do know that song, King of the Road. King of the Road. I know that song. Not a big fan of that music, but I do know that song, Lisa, for sure. Nephew Charles, what's going on? Good to see you. Maybe one of these days soon, Charles, you'll get to ride around in the RV with Brian. We had a good time last week. It was only 2 days, but it was pretty cool. The 80s, what's going on, Kathy? Good to see you. Karen, Jasmine, Charlotte, Glenn, The Real. Good to see you. The Real, I got your email from earlier today, and thank you. It was good to hear from you. And Facebooker, sup, Ed? That has to be Jill, even though I can't see the name. Cherie, thank you for moderating tonight. I deeply appreciate it. Suzanne. Hazel coming to us from New Zealand. Of course, The Real is from Australia. Assistant Carrie. Hello, friends. Coming to you from windy Fort Riley, Kansas. Isn't Carrie, remind me, isn't Fort Riley where Trevor Nichols was supposed to be going when he disappeared? Is that right? I think that's true. I don't know. I remember this stuff. And Hazel's saying time does fly. It does. I just don't know where the time went. And since last Monday in the RV trip, hello, happy Monday to everyone, to you too. Yeah, it's 2 a.m. here in England. First time I've caught a live. Well, thank you for making time. 2 a.m. in England, so you're already into Tuesday. And of course, those people in Australia and New Zealand, they are way into Tuesday. And Carrie says, here at my daughter's house. Wow, that's fantastic, Carrie. Suzanne, good to see you from Texas. Tom Brown Advocate. Good to see you in there. Thank you for showing up. So we have a nice showing of people tonight. Thank you all for making time. Regarding the rest of the RV trip, after you all saw me on Monday night for the live show, brother and I pulled out of Patty's place at about 11:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we made it to a rest area on what they call Gator Alley or the 75. This is the highway that goes east and west along the bottom of Florida. It kind of takes you from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast. We had talked about even going farther south, and there's this, I think it's a 2-lane called Route 41. We had to go way down into Miami, and we could have taken that road across just to see what that's like. And that was going to probably take a little more time than we wanted. And so we just decided to stick to the 75. And so we were on the 75, got off at the rest area. It was a beautiful night last Monday night. Sunday night was cold, but Monday night was beautiful. And we ended up sleeping over in that rest area. Then the next day we got up, we went to Estero, Florida, and we hung out with a friend of my brother's whose name is Jeff, and his wife was there as well. And we hung out there for several hours. I got to play with their dog, Maggie, who is a beautiful Doberman. Beautiful dog. And the dog liked me a lot. And then after that, we went and played some disc golf. And at Estero, where I've won multiple tournaments at that disc golf course in Estero. And then we got back on the 75. We stopped and got something to eat at a Wendy's. And then we pulled into here into his place where he stores his RV. I forget what time it was now at this point. It was dark, though. I would say that it was still kind of light out when we went over the Skyway Bridge between Bradenton and St. Pete. But by the time we got home, it was dark. And so went back, got my car, and made it home. So I got home on Tuesday night. So it was roughly like a 48-hour trip in which we made this huge circle going across the 4 through Orlando to Daytona Beach. Then went the whole way down to Fort Lauderdale, over to Naples, and then back up to Pinellas County. So this huge big circle, and it was a good time. I did not drive the RV. I just had visions of me hitting something, and I really didn't want to deal with that. Let's just put it that way. So I did the navigating, and my brother did all the driving. I just sat over there in the very comfortable passenger seat, and I will admit that I did fall asleep at least once sitting over there in the passenger seat. So there you go, while my brother drove, and I do not feel guilty about that. So it was fantastic. First time I've ever made a trip in an RV ever. And certainly I look forward to doing that again one day. It's probably going to be a while because my brother and his wife are leaving in the middle of or the beginning of May, and they won't be back till July. They're taking the RV out west. They're going up to Montana and then down to New Mexico, all over the place, like a 2-month trip all over that area. I don't know if they're going to go to Las Vegas or whatever, but so they're going to be gone for a while. And so I hope they have a good time. And this was kind of like a trial run of just making sure, because the RV had been sitting for a while. He just wanted to make sure there were no problems. The tires and everything were good, and it ran great. I didn't see any problems with it. There are a couple things that are not working on it right now that I think he's going to have to fix and get them working before they leave. But everything that was supposed to be working on this trip was working. So it was pretty good. And that is a fantastic way to see the United States. And so I'm certainly up for doing that again sometime soon, if Brian's wife allows, of course. So that was that. And speaking of disc golf, moving on to another topic. I actually played in technically there were 3 tournaments, but each course was its own tournament, but it was like just playing one tournament. Played 3 different courses on Saturday. I know I haven't had any like disc golf news for a while, but played over here at Cliff, and then went way down to the bottom of the county and played at Maximo, and then I came up and finished at my local course, Taylor. And really, for not practicing very much over the last couple months, especially when I was in Pennsylvania for a month and it was cold and everything, I didn't play at all. Played pretty well. I mean, I had some bad shots and I missed some putts and everything, but I averaged like 20 points above my rating, and I can't be displeased by that. Felt good. Wasn't throwing it very far, but that's a factor of not practicing much. But pretty accurate. Had a couple unfortunate breaks and everything. And I felt real good at the end of the day, too. The only thing that was bothering my feet had enough. They weren't necessarily hurting, but you could tell that I was on my feet in the hot weather for about, from 7 in the morning till about 5 in the afternoon. Like my feet felt kind of baked on the bottom. You know what I'm saying? It didn't ache. They just felt kind of baked and wrinkly and everything your feet can get sometimes if you're outside for a long time. That's the way my feet were, and they actually kind of still feel that way a little bit today. But otherwise, the rest of me was great. No soreness or anything. So it was a good day to play. Really pleased. Better than I could have hoped. And that's good because I have another tournament this weekend at a new course. It's kind of a temporary course north of here. It's on a ball golf course, and I always love playing on temporary disc golf courses that are set up on ball golf courses. Love those. In fact, my most favorite courses of all time were over in Daytona years ago when they had that tournament set up over there on ball golf courses. It's fantastic. And so if you're wondering, of course, we play in feet. Ball golf was played in yards, but we use like the greens and the bunkers are considered out of bounds. And of course, usually ball golf courses usually have some water that you have to throw around and things. So we'll see what it will be this coming weekend. Going to play it sight unseen. It's just going to be set up there for a couple days. I can't pass that up. And it's only like not even an hour away. So that's what I'll be doing on Saturday. 2 rounds up there on Saturday. Looking forward to it. And I really, though, do have to get some practice in through at least a couple days. Maybe I'll go play doubles tomorrow evening at Taylor. There's a thought. So let's see who else is in here, who has popped in. Shauna, what's going on? Shauna, I think of, what is that? That's Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right, Shauna? Call me Shauna. Remember that? And maybe you know that. Maybe you're the person with the name. Maybe you know that from that movie. When she says Shauna, there's like the heavenly voices that say Shauna. Hazel said fabulous trip. Yeah, it was. They should do a vlog of their journey every day. Charlotte, I see. Yeah, I don't know if my brother would want to do that. And all right, so Crystal, what's going on with you? Good to see you as well. All right, so disc golf. Of course, like I said, we got tax day, at least here in the United States. I got the RV news out, just the trip out of the way. Anything else going on with me? I went and ate after I was done on Saturday. I went and ate for the first time in years at Five Guys. You know, the chain, like the hamburger chain. It's been forever. And it was good. I have to admit, not a huge fan of the French fries. Their French fries, but their burgers are good. And the milkshake that I had was also good. And so maybe I don't know if I'll, I don't eat out much. It's weird. I don't cook much and I don't eat out much. And so you're probably saying, well, how do you eat, Ed? Well, I figure it out. I did make wings on Friday, and that was spectacular. But after I was done with disc golf on Saturday, I was like, I'm going to Five Guys. I've had this on my mind for a while. And so I got to go and do this. So let's move on to, now that we're about 20 minutes in, let's just start with what I got to talk about it. Of course, there's no poll this week, given that this past Friday was the Q&A episode. I want to thank everybody for sending in their questions. I hope everybody felt fairly represented, and I hope I didn't let you down with the answers to those questions. I guess maybe the one that I kind of hedged on was the one asking me, well, who would play you in a movie? Like I said, a little tough to say because I'm really not tuned into, I'm tuned into the actors of like older than I am and then my generation. I'm not tuned into like young actors or anything like that. So it's a hard question to answer, but I gave it my best shot. All right, let's talk about OJ Simpson. I can say pretty much for sure that he has never been a topic of conversation on the live show. I don't think I've ever written anything about him in any capacity since I started Unfound, or even before that. And I have to be honest that, and I'm talking about him because he died of cancer here within the last few days. He was 76 years old. And of course, he was part of what many people now call, the crime or the trial of the century. A lot of different things, at least in American culture, came together for that trial. I don't know if it had much an effect on, people like we have viewers here from England and Australia or New Zealand, wherever else in other countries. I don't know if they were so much into it, but certainly quite a portion of the United States back in 1995, that time, were certainly tuned in to everything that was going on there. However, I will admit that really didn't follow it that much. I remember, I was working for my family at the time in the car business. I worked there. Maybe some of you don't know, when I got out of college, I actually started my own business in drag racing, but I was also working for my family at their car dealership, selling cars, working with my cousins and my Uncle Ron and another uncle who was still working there at the time. And it, when that came on, of course, it was on regular TV. And so the TV would be on like in the waiting area for people who were getting their cars worked on and everything. And I can remember not really, even though I had an opportunity to do that, because sometimes with, in the car business, there's a lot of waiting and standing around. Really did not take much of an interest in it. Even today, I would not say that, I haven't watched any of the movies, that have been, been made about all of that. Certainly nowhere near an expert. So when I'm going to be talking about it tonight, I'm just going to be talking about it from a disappearance point of view. And, are there things that happened there with OJ and the trial, and what from that can we apply it to disappearances? I think, of course, there's a lot, as you can imagine. Even though those were murders, we cover disappearances, but we know that a lot of the disappearances we feature on Unfound are murders. In fact, like I keep throwing out that number, I think it's between 60 and 65%. But I also want to take a look at this, the way I look at it, of course, then in kind of intermingling, what would happen if this had happened here in the 21st century with social media? Because the internet, when that all happened, was just at least coming to most people in the United States. I know from my, the way I remember it, I didn't have internet at my house, although I did kind of live out in the country, until about 1995. And it was, the dial-up 19.9K, that I'm not going to make that sound, the sound that it would make, that squiggly, kind of static sound as it would hook up with the telephone line. That's kind of the internet that I started on. I didn't have cable internet or anything until I got to Las Vegas, but it was just kind of starting then, the trial and the internet at the same time. But still, I would not say that it was an internet phenomenon, but it was a spectacle, but I have to admit that I don't remember taking an interest in the Bronco chase. I just vaguely remember it, even though I know there are many, many people my age and older. Of course, I would have been 24, 25 at the time, who absolutely remember watching it and can remember where they were. And it, to many people, it's like, for people who are a lot older than I am, remembering where they were and they found out that JFK got shot, or of course, maybe for a lot of us here in the show tonight, where we were, where were you when you found out about 9/11? Did you see it? Did you experience it? For many people, that the Bronco chase is like that for many people. For me, I never took an interest in OJ Simpson even before all of this. He was kind of out of football before I started taking an interest in it. I knew him, from some of these comedy movies and everything, and from the Hertz commercials. But really, as far as a pop culture icon or something, it never quite registered to me. Whereas I know there were a lot of people who were crazy about OJ. And of course, before this all happened, he had this very, he was on a pedestal in American culture. And that, along with everything that went on, made it just all combined there in the mid 90s to what it became, the trial of the century. I will tell you, I am 100% inclined to believe that he absolutely did kill his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ron Goldman. I want you to know, let's just put that out there. On the other hand, I can see why, I know this is going to sound really weird, but given that I've now been a part of a murder trial twice, and experiencing that and thinking about it before you go into the courtroom and everything that the jury has to contemplate and everything, it was surprising to me back then that he was found not guilty. Now I think maybe that I have a better understanding about crime, maybe about American culture and everything. Maybe it's not as big as a surprise. And I'm not saying that was right or anything, but why was he acquitted? You read, and I've been doing some reading. There's been a lot written, and not just from the pundits and everything, really people looking at, well, why exactly did 12 people find him not guilty? Even though there was DNA, and of course they bring up, the racist cop and all of that. And I think it's a little bit more, and of course, the very easy answer, well, this is racial. Most, if not all, of the jury was black. He's black. And I think that's a little too simple. We do know that, of course, black juries do convict black people. They do that. And I will also say, if you want to look at the other way, if we're going to have to, because once again, if you read anything about OJ, you read about the racial part of it. It is unavoidable. Likewise, I'm inclined to believe, a lot of white people have let a lot of white killers off the hook as well. This just doesn't cut one direction. If that's how you want to look, well, black people just let OJ off. Well, and that's bad, and they shouldn't do that. You know what? A lot of white people have done the same thing. But I think it's more complicated than that. I will tell you, of course, Chris Darden and Marcia Clark, they've been out there in American culture since 1995. Although I really don't pay a lot attention to a lot of that stuff these days, but they are out there. And I have to tell you, they've never really impressed me. I look at them when they've made appearances since, and they might not even have anything to do with OJ's, the trial, or anything else, Judge Ito, or any of that. I really question how capable they really were. That's a huge part of it. I never thought, I can remember, like I said, I didn't follow it very much, but them compared to Johnny Cochran and the rest of the team that OJ had, usually I guess at least in American justice, we think of it as, well, the prosecution has all the advantage. They have the power of the state. They have unlimited money, the tax money. They, can do whatever they want. And of course, the way a trial is set up, the prosecution gets to go first in its opening statement. It gets to go last in its closing statement. If you're not somebody with means, then you have to go to the public defender's office, which we know what goes on there. And of course, I experienced that with Panky trial number 1 in contrast to Panky trial number 2 and all of that. But certainly, I think when we look back at this trial, it certainly seems like it's the opposite. That it was the prosecution that seemed to have the limited means and the lack of resources and the lack of ability and the lack of this and the lack of that. And it was the defense that just seemed to have everything. It was like the Avengers, like these all-star team over there. And it was totally flipped around. It's really interesting, I think, if you look back at it now. And if maybe some of you who are maybe not alive then, who didn't experience this, maybe you're thinking about what Kaylee Anthony or any of those trials. None of it touches what went on in the mid-90s with OJ Simpson. I even have it written, why was he acquitted? Like I said, it's a little more complex than saying that it was racial. It was white people murdered by a black guy, and most of the juror, if not all the juror, was black, and they were going to let him off. I get the idea. If Nicole and Ron had been black, I think it still would have gone this direction. I don't think that would have mattered. And I want you to know, I even have written my notes. I hate this kind of stuff. I hate talking about this, but it's unavoidable. If you want to read about any analysis, even professional attorneys analysis who now go back and look at that, the racial component, you can't read anything without that. I hate it, but that's the way it is. So, I'm just not convinced that Marcia Clark and Chris Darden and the rest of them are very good lawyers. I look back at it now, and like I said, just kind of studying up for this, and I'm never going to be an expert on it, but they took a lot of things for granted. Of course, we have the glove that OJ put it on. Of course, it didn't fit. They should have been able to predict that it wasn't going to fit. Of course, they had an opportunity to maybe change venue. They didn't do that. It just seemed to me they weren't very good lawyers. And I also think, on top of everything else, they just kind of took for granted that this was an open and shut case. I think they just took that. I think they really just took that granted. For once again, that makes them horrible liars. And you wonder, of course, that county has a lot of different prosecutors. What would have happened if it were different people? It's not like, of course, maybe we start thinking about Law and Order, where you always have, going way back, Sam Waterston, Jack McCoy and Angie Harmon as assistants, or wherever those women were, multiple women as assistants over that time. He was the prosecuting attorney. But you have to remember, that's district attorney's office, especially in a city like LA, they have multiple people. It didn't have to be Marcia Clark. It didn't have to be Chris Darden. And so you wonder how it would have gone with different lawyers. Now, I guess these two were supposed to be the A team, I guess. These are some of the things that I think about when I think back at that trial, that they couldn't predict that, they couldn't do anything to stop the one guy, forgetting his name, I know somebody's going to bring it up, that, he'd made racist comments. Of course, now these days, it hasn't seemed to have affected his career, because I know he appears on all sorts of news shows all the time. And he wrote a true crime book that I think was a bestseller or something. So happy for him. But they, the prosecution didn't, he was their witness. He didn't do much to, protect him on the stand. Could they not have predicted that this was coming? There were a lot of mistakes made by the prosecution. Whereas I think you look at the defense, OJ's defense, and I don't know how many mistakes they made. And maybe sometimes that's what this all comes down to. And given that I just brought up the Pankey trial, once again, of course, very small compared. Yeah, Mark Furman. Thank you, Kathy. Very small compared to OJ's case. Here's what I still know. There's, this is the way it goes in the United States sometimes. There's certainly more proof that OJ killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman than there is that Steve Pankey killed Janelle Matthews. I'm always going to, from now, if you're watching me on the live show 20, 30 years from now, it's always going to be a comparison when I bring up trials. And whether people were guilty or not, were they proven to be guilty or not, I'm just going to continue to do that. So let's see what everybody is saying. So I'm just going to take a break here and see. Yeah. Hazel says, haven't heard about your spectacular wings lately. That's because I haven't made them for a while, Hazel, but I'm just as good at making wings as ever. Trust me. If the glove doesn't fit, yeah. Sheree says, Hazel says 100% he did it. Sheree says, first trial ever watched. I think that's true for a lot of people. That's certainly, I think it's true for a lot of people. It was a seminal event, big cultural event, at least in the United States. Of course, Hazel, I know, you're in New Zealand or wherever, you knew about it and everything, but it's American football. Does that really translate to other countries? Or, if it would have been a soccer star or something, maybe it'd been a little different. Shauna says, yes, I remember that. Love that movie, 16. No, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Okay, Shauna, you do remember. Louise says, oh, yeah, I remember the car chase live on over here in England, and the trial was all over the news. Yeah. Carrie says, Carrie, the OJ trial was a big deal here in Australia. I watched the verdict live in the middle of the night. All right, so Australians were into it, I guess. The car chase was big, huh? Yeah, even today in England, breaks are not broadcast live or recorded. Louise, even today on the UK trials are not broadcast. Oh, okay. Back when we were babies, Carrie. Yeah, I remember dial-up internet in 99, Hazel says. Hello, Mary B. Talking about OJ. CCV and cell phones have totally changed everything. Yeah, I'm going to get into that, Hazel, here in a little bit. Better attorney over the state. Watch the verdict live in high school. Thunderbird says he was celebrated too, so there's that. Happy Monday. What's going on, Valerie? The glove doesn't fit, must have quit. That's practically all I know about the trial, Hazel says. Probably from watching Kardashians. Yeah, you shouldn't be watching that. Carrie, how many celebrities are convicted? Robert Blake was guilty too. He wasn't convicted either. Well, the thing is, Kathy, a lot of those celebrities got convicted for bribing. What was it? Somebody at USC to get their kids into the school. Some of them did a little bit of time. Hazel, power and influence used to play a big part. Yeah, they're talking about the glove. Hazel, something Alex Murdaugh relied on. Kathy says he was acquitted because he was a celebrity. So Kathy says the forensic evidence against OJ was overwhelming. Yes, gloves do shrink when they're washed. Mark Furman, did you see that the grand? I saw Thunderbird, and yes, I was wrong. I'm going to get to that. Shelley, the whole glove thing was ridiculous. Yeah, Naked Gun was a global phenomenon. Yeah, that's right. He was in the Naked Gun movies. Yeah, right. Yeah, I saw that, Lisa. I don't think I'm going to get to talk about the Russ movie about that tonight. I don't think I'm going to get to that. So a couple of you have already brought that up. So what does this mean had this happen in the 21st century? Would it be different? Well, given the way racial relations have been going over the last few years, at least in the United States, I'm not sure that would have mattered much. If there's going to be a thought out there among people who have really looked at the trial and said, you know what, he was such a big African-American black superstar, both in movies and football, announcing, entertainment, movie, everything, commercials, everything. And that's why they let him off. Then I guess we have to believe that certainly could happen now. All right. At least once again, I'm just speaking for my country. I'm not speaking for anybody else's country. I think we have to be very, very open to that. Now, of course, the counter to that would be that in this day, we would have more tech information. We certainly would. We have to remember that Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson were stabbed in broad daylight in, Brentwood, California, a suburb of LA. And of course, we know about the scene, and I'm not going to get into we've heard about, how bad it was and everything. But we also have to remember that in this day and age, we might have, of course, this was outside Nicole Brown Simpson's home. Maybe these days, if she was still around here in the 21st century, maybe she would have one of those Ring cameras, for example, that have caught so much these days. Both they've been assist in murders, they assist in car thefts, they assist in people stealing packages off of people's porches, they assist in disappearances. Of course, those Ring cameras have done quite a bit. They've helped solve a lot of mysteries. Or she could have just had run-of-the-mill regular security cameras, as many famous people do. That might have been a big change. And of course, you could have that in 1995, certainly, but it cost a lot more money. It was a little clunkier. Of course, you have to use VHS tapes and all of that. We don't know if anything would get recorded, on and on and on. Of course, these days, you can have these little cameras that are so tiny, nobody can even see them. And the video can be downloaded to a hard drive that could just virtually record forever and never take up, all the space in a hard drive or something. So that's certainly one big difference. Another big difference, of course, is phones. I mean, it's kind of along the same lines with cameras, but we know, you can go on YouTube or anywhere these days and find people who have, filmed their own carjackings and filmed their own assaults. And I can even remember for some years ago where a woman was with her man and they got pulled over by a cop, and it eventually devolved into a shooting, and she filmed the whole thing as it was happening. And so I guess we might be open to the idea here, if something like that were to happen, that it would actually get filmed by somebody. Maybe Nicole would see OJ coming and she'd have her phone and film him, and maybe he'd know I'm going to get caught and he wouldn't do it. Or Ron would have a phone and, the same thing might happen. On the other hand, once again, going forward with the idea that OJ did this, then maybe knowing that they would have phones and cameras, or she has cameras outside her house or something, maybe he would have found a way, if he really, really was intent on killing her, then maybe he would have decided on a different way to do it. This is, I haven't talked about it recently, but we have to remember the bad guys are smart too. This is why, even in this age of DNA and video cameras and social media and everything else, a lot of murders still don't get solved. In fact, you would be quite disgusted by the closure rate that most major cities have on their homicides, despite everything that we talk about on Unfound with pings and phone records and cameras and social media and everything else. It's amazing how many outright murders where the bodies are there go unsolved. It's horrible. In fact, the closure rate on homicides in the United States is lower now. The percentage is lower than it was before all of this stuff came along. So technology is not a guarantee. We should never think that. Why? Because once again, the bad people know about this technology too. And so what do? They plan these things out in a way where they know there will be no cameras and they won't get recorded. Or they wear masks or hoodies and everything else so they can't be identified. If they're going to use a car, they take the license plate off the car. They know about these things too. And so it's this continual back and forth between the good guys using the technology and the bad guys evading the technology. In fact, the bad guys may be even using the technology to their benefit when we get into identity theft and things. So we can certainly think that technology of the 21st century might have kept OJ from killing Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, but there's no guarantee on that. It very well just might have been that he was intent on doing this and he would have found another way to do it. This also shows, something that we've experienced on Unfound, that even though it did eventually come out that OJ Simpson was not the angel that everybody thought. I mean, once this all came out, even though he was found not guilty, and of course he did go to jail later for trying to steal memorabilia that he thought was his, and he was using a gun, and that's why he eventually went to jail for many, many years. California couldn't get him, but my previous state of Nevada could, and I thank them for that. But this just shows that when we think about disappearances, one of the things that I've talked about in the man said types of disappearances, it's always amazing to me how many of these guys don't have criminal records, either before or after. Nothing. They maybe have a speeding ticket or not wearing their seatbelt or something. But there's so many of these guys who seem just like your average guy who would never break the law and everything. And then, of course, their wife disappears, and then they tell all these crazy stories. But then these guys never break the law again. And you think, well, what's going on there? This is a perfect. Of course, OJ did go on to break the law, but at least before he presumably murdered Nicole and Ron, didn't have anything bad happen to him, even though there were things going on behind the scenes. He did beat Nicole Brown Simpson. He was physical with other women, but you didn't know about that. Now, that very well may be because of his fame and everything. Cops showing up and just saying, we'll just separate him. It's OJ and he's a good guy and everything. It happens, and I hate it. And as I've said, I wonder, being that most police officers are men, especially back then, I wonder if, I just got to say it. Maybe a lot of these police officers let OJ get away with it because some of these officers were women beaters themselves. I'm perfectly open to that. Just so you know. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. We run into it in Unfound Disappearances. The one that I think of is, what was it? Rhonda Smith, the woman who, remember, she was engaged. I think this was in Georgia. She was a dancer. Her fiance had been married to another woman, and then they met. He was at her strip club. He gets divorced. They get engaged. And then she goes missing while driving like his work vehicle or something. Remember that? You remember this for a couple years ago now. And it was, I think, what was her mother, I think, was the guest. And it is believed, a lot of people believe that her fiance had something to do with it. Maybe to remind you, there was like a shower curtain missing from the house. Maybe this is all coming back to some of you now. And this disappearance was like 30 years ago. And then not long after she went missing and her car was found, or that work truck was found at a mall, he ended up meeting another woman, got engaged, got married, is still married to that woman to this day. So why is it that wife number one didn't go missing? I guess technically wife number two, but he was engaged to Rhonda. She didn't go missing, but Rhonda did go missing. What is that? Why does that all happen? Even though I think a lot of people, I think the way it was presented, and I try to do it the most objective way that I can. What goes on there? And even going back to OJ, he'd had a lot of women. OJ was with a lot of women. Professional athletes have those opportunities. Let's just put it that way. Wilt Chamberlain and the rest of them. What was it about Nicole that he felt he needed to kill her, but all these other women, of course, lived? Was it just because she was the ex-wife or whatever else? And I'm also inclined to believe that Ron Goldman, very, very sadly, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, the way I look at it, once again, I am not, an expert on it. But the way I've generally looked at it for a long time now is that really he was intent on going over there to just kill her, and Ron Goldman just happened to be there. Now, it very well may be that Nicole and Ron had something going on. I have no idea. But Ron just happened to be there, and there's no way that OJ could have known that Ron was going to be there. Certainly could have predicted Nicole was going to be there because that's where she lived. But he couldn't have predicted that Ron was going to be there, and then there you go. Very tragic. But there's a lot. Like I said, this is one of those things. If Nicole Brown Simpson had gone missing under the same circumstances, or maybe Nicole and Ron go missing, first, maybe we might be open to the idea maybe they ran off together somewhere. But if OJ, after the fact, was telling some of the stories that we've heard on Unfound, would be thinking, I think OJ did this. Even though there might not be a crime scene, and there might not be bodies, and any bodies, and we might not have a murder weapon, and all the things, of course, that played a role in the actual trial. I think we would be thinking that OJ Simpson caused the disappearance of his ex-wife and this guy that was bringing a pair of sunglasses or something to her that she had left somewhere at a restaurant or something. I don't think that would be a crazy thought at all. But it just shows you how quick I have it in here. This just shows you how quick this can happen, and how quickly things can change. And I even have it in here regarding the jury. I am also open to this, and this may be a little controversial. It very well, and there's these people out there that it could be that the members of the jury maybe thought that Nicole deserved it. That OJ was such a good guy and all these things. You mean they couldn't work their marriage out? And then some of them might have been thinking, she's going out with some younger guy, and some people don't like that. There's a lot of misogynists out there. And they, I don't know if there's any way in the jury selection process to weed those kinds of people out. So that is also something that goes through my mind regarding the entire OJ trial. Like I said, I am not an expert on it, and I've just been reading a little bit because I knew I was going to be talking about it tonight. As soon as I knew that he died, I knew I was going to be talking about it a little bit. But what we should take away from this is that this kind of thing, kind of a famous person, no matter what race, this could still happen in the 21st century, even though the facts are we probably would have even more facts. Once again, talking about technology and everything, with even more technology here in the 21st century, this could still happen. Maybe for somebody, maybe some of you don't realize this. OJ Simpson being charged with murder and all of this would be like Patrick Mahomes, quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, being charged with it. That's how big OJ Simpson was. Of course, OJ was already retired, but it may be like Tom Brady. It would be like Tom Brady being charged with the murder of his ex-wife, Giselle. That's how big it was. That was how big it was. Or for maybe some of you who don't know those names, it would be like Lionel Messi being charged with murder, like in Argentina or something. It's like that big. It's the soccer star. Maybe some people consider him to be the greatest soccer player of all time, up there with Pele or whatever. Something like that. That's how big it was in the United States at the time. So let's see what everybody's saying. And once again, I've been Hazel says leaps and bounds in tech is absolutely amazing. Certainly true. But like I said, for all of you, we're all here to learn. Unfound, it's a news program. We're all trying to learn. I'm trying to educate all of you. I'm trying to learn myself. But we should never convince ourselves this couldn't happen again because of technology and everything. This could still happen today. With somebody under different circumstances. Just keep that somebody famous person trying to get away with murder, somebody of like so high profile. We should not think that it's going to be easier to convict somebody like that because of technology. I guess what I'm also saying, the OJ days are not behind us. In fact, we live with them every day. Ed, have you been getting any more letters from Steve Pankey? No, not since I got back from Pennsylvania, Charlotte. In fact, I had that in my notes to just mention tonight. I'm due to write him a letter because there are a few things that I have to ask him. Maybe I'll type one out tomorrow. But no, I haven't heard from him for a while. I do understand, though, that he's not just communicating with me. I know he's communicating it with at least one filmmaker as well. So, it's not like if I don't write him that he doesn't have anybody to talk to. Kathy says, OJ was angry over Nicole earlier that evening. Couldn't let her go. Most dangerous time in a domestic violence relationship. Julie says domestic homicide is alive and well. Charlotte says, I read online that OJ's kids had to sign NDAs while he was dying, but I don't know if that is right. I don't know what that. Kathy is reminding me about Rhonda Smith was driving her husband's buddy's truck. Thank you, Kathy. The buddy worked for Rhonda's husband. That's correct. Carrie, I think it's slimy. He didn't want to pay out the Goldmans even in death. Yeah, there was the civil trial, which he was found liable. Bad guy. And I think this is always something we should always remember when, we as humans, there's something about our psyche in which we like putting people on pedestals, whether it be politicians or athletes or musicians or actors or whoever else. We put them on these pedestals and we get this kind of idea that they are a certain people when they're not. It's a very this is what has allowed, this is what allowed Hitler to come to power and all sorts of things over centuries and centuries and centuries. Just because we all have cell phones and electricity and everything else does not change our nature. And unfortunately, under the right conditions, we really accept a lot of bad people. And we, blind ourselves. We turn off anything bad about them because we can't take the pain. And it's very bad. It's a horrible part of human nature. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And it's caused a lot of pain, a lot of deaths, a lot of murders, purges, the Holocaust, everything else. It's all horrible. And that's kind of what went on with OJ Simpson. There were people in LA who knew he was abusive to women, and they had their own reasons and not wanted to talk about it. They still wanted to be friends with him because he was famous and everything else. It's bad. It's really bad. Glenn says, yeah, OJ, I can't have her. Nobody can, right? Yeah, definitely. If I can't, yeah. Hazel agreeing. Kathy says, poor Ron Goldman in the wrong place at the wrong time, returning Nicole's sunglasses. Yeah. Ron wasn't straight. I didn't know that, Kathy. Classic case. Yeah, I can't have you. Nobody can, which is certainly something that has certainly gone on in Unfound Disappearances. Hazel says, I never read into the case, so just assumed theory going around that Cole was dating him. I guess not, being that Ron Goldman wasn't straight. That's the first time I heard of that. Okay. Kathy says they deliberated a very short time for OJ. Did they not consider we had done to Nicole on those domestic violence calls? Nope, didn't care. This is, well, the thing is, Kathy, this is part of the reason that so many people say that this was racial. That there is a lot of I know there's a lot of fringe stuff out there regarding OJ and everything, but a lot of mainstream stuff you can find is part that it was because she was a white woman that had, maybe if she had been a black woman, maybe they might have convicted him. That's not what I think. Just passing along information. Nicole was terrified of OJ. I can understand why. Lisa, go Chiefs. I like that Ron Goldman's dad said no big loss after hearing OJ's death. That's true. Yeah, Ron Goldman. Yeah, and his father. Very sad. Mary, so I was warming up food and trying to listen, but was Nicole and Ron dating or no? I guess I'm just finding out now, Mary, that Ron was gay. So I guess not. Yeah, she was terrified of OJ. All right. NDAs already talking about the kids. Hello, Ferry. We're talking about OJ still. Almost done with it. And Carrie's talking as a former domestic violence victim. Carrie's talking. That's her, of course, point of view. Charlotte, yes, that is something that was true. Mary, no, they were just friends according to their families. OJ thought he was above the law. Rockford, speaking of LA sports criminals, we may have lost Ohtani to the Dodgers, but at least it came with a side dish of Ipe. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, him and his. Yeah, once again, although it's not as serious, Rockford, that's a very good example. The Major League Baseball has put a lot of time and effort into building up Ohtani as the next big thing. They're trying to make inroads in Japan and elsewhere, and they will do everything to cover up the fact that almost assuredly Ohtani was the one that racked up all those gambling debts and not his interpreter. It's a perfect example of that. Yep. It's horrible. I hate it. But she had just told her mom that night he was her soulmate. Go figure. Yeah, well, I don't know, Fairy. So there is OJ Simpson. Even though we had the Murdaugh trial, of course, Casey Anthony, and some other big trials so far here in the 21st century, certainly nothing has touched OJ Simpson yet. Despite, in my opinion, maybe you have a different opinion. If you do, please put it in the comments. But, I mean, I can't even imagine how big the coverage and all the craziness had that happened in the 21st century. If it had happened within the last 10 years with TMZ and everything. Oh my gosh, can't even imagine it. So, but I do predict, of course, we have 76 more years to go in this century. And of course, I don't think any of us are going to make it to the end of it. But I got to believe before the century is over, it will happen again. Where somebody who is seen as being a pillar of the community and everything else does something horrible and, murders people and is, hires high-powered lawyers and everything to get off the hook. And, we'll just be back, but it'll end up, of course, being bigger than OJ's trial because of how the media is and everything we have today. It's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. It might not happen in my lifetime, but it will happen. It will certainly happen. All right, so that's OJ. That's just some of my insights regarding it. And like I said, if you're going to delve back into it, maybe now that OJ's dead, you maybe need to take a second look at it. Maybe go to the Wikipedia page or whatever else. I hope you will look at it through the lens of, what if this had been a disappearance? What if this had been a disappearance? And I think, like I said, I think this shows that how quickly this stuff can happen. When we start think about disappearances that seem to be like the murders of Nicole and Ron, it's like one day everything's fine, and then the next day somebody's missing or somebody's dead. There's no lead up, there's no planning, there's no scheming, there's no precursors or anything like that. It's just everything's fine 1 second, and the next it's not. It's crazy how that happens. Yeah, I talked about Diddy last week. Regarding P. Diddy. You know who had the best coverage of OJ Simpson? Norm Macdonald. Yeah, the law couldn't get him, but Norm surely did. Yeah, I've seen that written over the last couple of days. Rockford, thank you for that. All right, moving on to some other things. We're gonna go in. Get into a couple stories where I got them wrong. And once again, I don't mind saying when I get things wrong, and I cover it anyway. So let's talk about Dylan Rounds. Dylan Rounds was a disappearance that I covered as an Unfound Now episode. I think it was a year ago. Time's flying. Disappeared in 22. So that's going to be 2 years ago. Oh my gosh. So I'm just going to read the story. His remains have been found. Skeletal remains found in a remote part of western Utah are believed to belong to Dylan Rounds, a 19-year-old farmer who disappeared in 2022. Authorities announced Tuesday, so this would have been 6 days ago. After the man charged in Rounds' death reportedly led authorities to the burial site. Well, even though this guy's a killer, I give him credit for leading the police to the location. We know, of course, that there have been many suspects that we've mentioned on Unfound who've been given the opportunity to do that and haven't. Of course, they're still walking around as free men. I give this guy credit that he led them to the remains, maybe got some deal or something. The human remains were discovered Tuesday in Lucin, a small railroad community located about 200 miles northwest of Salt Lake City. The FBI processed the area for evidence and recovered the remains, which are in the possession of the Utah Office of the Medical Examiner to confirm the identity. Rounds was last seen on his farm in Lucin and reported missing on May 30th of 2022. In March 2023, the sheriff's office announced that James Brenner, which charged with aggravated murder and abuse or desecration of a human body for the murder of Rounds and the disposal of his body, Brenner led investigators to the location last Tuesday as part of a plea agreement. We thank everyone for their support and love. Brown's mother said, "We are grateful we now have Dylan's body and we can bring him home as we continue our fight for justice." According to a probable cause statement, Round's last signal to his phone was pinged to a pond not far from where Brenner was staying. KUTV reported Rounds' boots were found near a dirt mound and his phone was discovered at the bottom of the pond. Rounds spoke with his grandmother on the phone before he disappeared, but that was the last time his family heard from him. The sheriff's office said Tuesday it would not release any more information so as not to compromise the ongoing legal proceedings. Our hearts go out to the family of Dylan Rounds. We offer our sincerest condolences for the loss of their family member. We understand that the pain of the loss is immeasurable, and we want to express our deepest sympathies to them. It is our hope they can find peace moving forward. So if you go back, and I guess it's not 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, if you go back and watch or listen to that Unfound Now episode where I talked about Dylan's disappearance, you will find that I said pretty much at the end, because I do a little analysis at the end of every one of those, that I thought it was very possible that Dylan walked off just on his own. Now, granted, at that time, some of the information that is in this article, and it's been found out since, I did not know. As you know, I cover these disappearances for Unfound Now not long after they happened, maybe within a month or something. So I'm not sure that at the time that I did that Unfound Now that I knew that his phone had been founded upon. I knew the boots were, of course, news, but some of these other things, I'm not sure they were known, or at least they weren't public when I did that episode. But I did get it wrong. And on the other side of this, though, this continues, though, the theme that people are usually killed by people they know. Now, my understanding of what went on here was that Brenner was a squatter and that maybe Dylan had to go past his place to get to where his farm was and everything, and they had words in the past. And I guess it seems that Brenner had enough, and he went to where Dylan was and killed him. And then, took him away there. And it very well may be, maybe this Brenner guy had assistance in doing this. Whereas I was looking at it, Dylan's out there by himself, and we know how that is. We've certainly covered some disappearances where I think that really that the best choice, the best theory is that the young man or woman or old man or old woman walked off all by themselves. I guess that I should have taken a little more seriously this conflict that Dylan had with this guy. I guess I should have, in my analysis, which was known at the time, I should have taken that at least more seriously. Of course, the opposite of that, though, a lot of people go missing who have beefs with people. And then those people, the antagonist, I guess you might say, end up having nothing to do with the disappearance. So still trying to work that all out. I don't think there's any perfect formula at this point. I'm just happy that this Brenner, horrible guy, but I do want to give him some credit. It very well could have been that he just said, you know what? I'm just going to swallow it all. I know where Dylan's remains are. They're never going to be found. And I'm just going to go to my grave with that. And we know a lot of killers do that. Even if they're convicted and they're given lighter sentence, given deals, if they'll give up where bodies are, they won't do it. And we can even say with some of the disappearances that we've covered on Unfound, for example, Angie Arnell, of course, with Marianne Chapman, Asher Chapman dying recently, that, of course, he went to jail saying that her body was in this lake somewhere and they never did find her. And he's now a free man. Can't do anything about that. So I give Brenner credit for that. Of course, I don't respect him in any other way. Obviously, he's a horrible, horrible human being. Yeah, he was a squatter. It was, let's see here. Going back up here. Charlotte says regarding OJ, I think it was his celebrity status that caused him to be let off. That's what Kathy said earlier. Certainly that thinking is out there. Certainly. You read a lot about this, people who analyze it, almost 30 years later. That comes up. Hey, there's a lot coming out about Diddy. Yeah, he's no pillars. Yeah. Lisa says, I love Norm Macdonald. Charlotte says, I read the book he wrote. If I did it, never read it, never would consider doing that, Charlotte, but I'm glad you did. Thunderbird, I'm so glad Brenner said where he was. Yeah, we don't get that much. Kathy, Charlotte, did you like the book? I wouldn't have bought or read the book. He was so guilty. Dylan's family can have some peace. Yes. Charlotte says the book was terrible. Why did he kill him? It was just a beef having to do with Brenner being on Dylan's property, Hazel. Said in the book he didn't do it, but I don't believe it. Hazel was something trivial. Yeah. Regarding Dylan, opened a gate he wasn't supposed to open. I think Dylan didn't want him to live there anymore. Yeah, I think so too. I thought the guy killed Dylan because he wanted Dylan's land. It was Dylan's property, Ferry says. Brenner had worked for Dylan in Southeast Idaho previously. Wasn't Brenner squatting on Dylan's land? So sad. Dylan had such potential in his life and a drive that most kids these days don't. That's true. Look at Dirtbag. Yeah, Carrie, I know that Angie's case is very personal to you. Michelle, how are you? Hello. Hello, everyone. Hi. Well, hello to you, Michelle. Mary, yes, wasn't squatting on Dylan's land with Dylan's permission and helping him with stuff around the farm. I had a feeling it was that guy. He had been a suspect since the beginning, right? Yes, I think. That's what I was thinking, Kathy. Kathy, wasn't just Brenner and Dylan, poor kid, all alone with the creep. Yeah. You just wonder if maybe Dylan wasn't old enough to totally understand or respect maybe what was going on there and the trouble that could happen. Just something that comes to mind. You know, if he'd have been, instead of 19, if he would have been 35, maybe he would have been a little more on edge or something, keeping an eye out for Brenner. And maybe at 19, he just maybe didn't understand the dynamics of what was going on and maybe how dangerous Brenner could be. Whereas somebody with a little more experience with people and with work and property and all these things might have understood, you know, this guy is really shady and I got to do something about him immediately. Just a thought. Melissa says, finally made it back to the live show. Sounds like I missed some OJ chit chat. You did, Melissa. But it's good to see you. Where you been? Where you been? Yeah, Kathy says, yes, Dylan was naive about Brenner. Facebook still following the Caleb Harris case. He is from New Braunfels, where I live. Seems search and press have wound to a halt. I think law enforcement knows. Facebook user, I can't see who your name is, but you think that law enforcement knows what regarding Caleb Harris? Maybe you want to continue that thought. Melissa says, Scouts. You were at Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or something. Okay, Melissa. I guess that's a good excuse. Kidding, of course. All right, so Dylan Rounds. That's another unfound now that has been resolved. All right, let's go into one that I actually got correct, and this is an actual Unfound podcast episode. Coming to you from Beckley, West Virginia. An arrest has been made in relation to the disappearance of Alec Carter. Of course, we called her Natasha, but this is Susan and Natasha Carter who went missing in West Virginia. Remember that Natasha slash Alex's father, Ricky, was the guest. Between 10th and the 11th of 2024, West Virginia State Police, the FBI, and U.S. Marshals excavated a backyard in the Beckley-Mabscott area. And you should know, when I drive to and from Pennsylvania, I come within a half mile of this house. I have to go through Beckley. It's imperative to go through Beckley, West Virginia, to go to and from Florida and where I'm going in Pennsylvania. And that house is not too far off the highway at all. I've looked at it on a map, of course. And even when I was driving back just a couple weeks ago, it was actually on my mind. That's right. That house is like right over there on the other side of those trees. But this backyard in the Beckley-Mabscott area, Larry Webb was indicted for the first-degree murder of Natasha Alex Carter in October of 2023. So nothing for Susan yet, it seems. Raleigh County prosecuting attorney Ben Hatfield confirmed to 59 News that after an extremely difficult and long battle, Larry Webb was taken into custody on Friday, April 12th. Of course, this kind of started last year. Webb's health and age made it difficult for the arrest to be made. Webb is being held without bond. So this is one that I did get right. Let me see what everybody's saying before I continue with this. Hazel says we're missing Marty tonight too. I don't know where Marty is. I actually was having a back and forth with Marty on Messenger today. I don't know where he is. He's a very busy guy. If you get to know him a little bit like I have, very busy guy. Melissa says Scouts 4 hours. Scouts are 4 hours. What the heck? Kathy talked to Marty today too. How about that? He was so trusting, Charlotte said, regarding Dylan, I guess. Facebooker, hi, Stacy, continuing my thought on Caleb Harris. Tuned in on a Reddit account that appears he left voluntary to meet somebody. Would think this would come up with an IP address. I have to admit that I'm always suspicious of anything written on Reddit, so I don't go there, but okay. Maybe it's true. Hey, Kays, Marty, oops, typo. Law enforcement tuned in on a Reddit account, supposedly Caleb's. Okay. Mary, yes, Ed, I was thinking the whole time he was so young and maybe a bit more naive regarding Dylan again, and unsuspecting that someone 10 plus years older. Yeah, could be, Mary. And hello, Tracy. Hello to you tonight. Thank you for tuning into the live show. We got about 40 minutes to go. So getting back to Larry Webb and Susan Natasha Carter, this is something that I believed. I continue to believe that what happened here was, of course, Susan, much younger than Larry Webb. Larry Webb is thinking, man, if I can marry a woman a lot younger than I am, that's a nice gig if you can get it. And as you heard Natasha / Alex's father say, they moved in with Larry. And then it wasn't too long after that, Larry and Susan got married. And then it wasn't too long after that Susan and Natasha had gone. And to remind, we're gone. And Larry told the story that they left with a couple of Mexicans. And that the big issue was, of course, that Larry forgot their names. He would say there were two Mexicans, like Juan and Pedro. And the next time it was Ricardo and Paco or something. And that, of course, was like, not sure we're believing that story. But my interpretation of what went on in this disappearance is that Larry thought, hey, Susan's so many years younger than me. And go back and listen to the interview that I did with her ex-husband, Natasha's father. He talks very glowingly about how Susan looked and built and all of that stuff. I still remember about that interview. He was very straightforward about that, almost to point of not being PG. And maybe I think that's what Larry was thinking. Wow, this, and little did he know, maybe, we delude ourselves sometimes like this. And he's thinking, well, this attractive young woman likes me, but, really, let's just admit it. Susan was probably just a gold digger. And you heard once again from Ricky that, she was nuts. That was the reason they weren't a couple anymore. So she moves in, and Larry at some point starts figuring out, what the heck did I do? And one thing led to another, and he killed her. And I think that he killed Natasha because she knew what went on. He had to be, he just couldn't kill one, had to kill both. And of course, they're still digging there. They're still out on that property. And it seems like a good place to start. Of course, the question is, what if they don't find anything there? What if they don't find any bodies there? Then it's going to get a little difficult. Then it's going to get very much more difficult to figure out where Susan and Natasha are. And no, I'm not inclined to believe that Larry sex trafficked Natasha or anything like that. This just sounds to me like, remember, I think Larry Webb worked for the post office or something. Seems like a fairly run-of-the-mill, average, boring guy living by himself, runs into this Susan woman 20, 30 years younger than he is and thinks, well, this is fantastic. And it didn't end up being fantastic. And so he killed her. That's the way I still look at it. So FBI, I guess, and others are looking over that piece of land where that house is right now. It's not a very big piece of land, but you also have to remember these disappearances are like 20 some years old. So if he did dig up the backyard and put them in there and then, of course, planted grass, by this time, it's just going to look like the rest of the yard. Now, if he was so obvious to put, a concrete slab over a piece of the land where it doesn't look like it should be, like Carlos Rodriguez did, then it's maybe straightforward. But they may have to dig up the entire yard, every square foot of it, if Larry's not going to tell them. And it doesn't sound like he did that yet, or they think they would have been found by now. So, but I got that one right. Like I said, in my opinion, there was not much of a mystery. Maybe some people did think that Susan and Natasha ran off. Maybe she took some of Larry Webb's money and the two took off and changed their identities or something. That never seemed very viable to me. But, the thing is, what the tough thing about covering that disappearance, the way I remember it, is that, their disappearances kind of got mixed in with Brian Cook's disappearance and some of these other disappearances. Were these all related somehow? Because, they're all, of course, West Virginia is not a very big state anyway, but they were all kind of in that general area of Virginia. And I kind of looked into that. It just really never made any sense to me. I could never see any patterns or anything. So I think this is once again proving, and once again, I think what a lot of people thought, that are not connected. The Brian Cook's disappearance is all on its own. And Alex or Natasha and Susan's disappearances stand by themselves, or, sit alone as well. So let me go up and see what everybody is. Hello. Once again, hello to you, Tracy. What's going on? Rockford, speaking of people who have been absent, did you notice that Anthony is back and blogging again? Just noticed he posted entries in February after 3-year absence. Oh, yeah. Crime Blogger 1983. I haven't noticed that. Yeah. Cherie, Anthony was here for the live show, tuned in from Facebook. He did. Okay. Thank you for letting me know, Cherie. Rockford, nice. Not sure if Anthony will see this, but great to see him to return to form. Yeah, returning to form. A good way to put it, Rockford. Charlotte, Ed, have you ever tried to talk to anyone in Tyler Davis's case, missing from Columbus, Ohio? I have. And they're just not doing any media anymore, Charlotte. Just not. On one hand, I can understand why. And on the other hand, of course, it's very disappointing to me. We don't have time to get into all the details. This is the guy that was out with his wife and a friend, and Tyler wasn't feeling well. And he said, they went back to the hotel. He needed to go for a walk. And was he drunk? Was he on something? He couldn't find his way back to the hotel, and he was never seen again, even though it's, in a very urban area. And there's been a lot of fingers pointed at his wife. There's been a lot of fingers pointed at this friend who was with them that night. I have to admit, I'm not sure what to make of it right at this point. Certainly would love to find out, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, Charlotte. Because I've given it a couple tries, and you never get any response. In fact, I think I even tried to go through like a third party, somebody who was in a group or something that had communicated with Tyler's wife or something, and they're just not doing anything. Melissa agrees. I agree. You react with this. Yeah, I finally got one right, Melissa. I'm not sure who I'd least like to have deliver my mail, Larry or Robert Cincinnati. Look at you going with that, Rockford. Mary, yes, I've been reading a bit about Natasha Carter case in Web. That was a good interview. I remember that one. And it was just as you said. Yeah, Ricky, Natasha's father, is a character. But I think what we all learned is that he's a really good guy, and he was exactly right. He had his finger on the pulse of this disappearance from the beginning. It's very sad. And he's a little eccentric and everything else, but he got it right. And, I just feel bad for him. Carrie, I admire Anthony's tenacity. Okay. So that's Larry Webb. And I will, of course, be talking about this again. If you don't know, update episodes number 17 is coming out this Friday. I'll talk about that in a bit. All right. So going back to the one that I got wrong, and I just talked about it last week. 4 people were arrested and charged in connection to the disappearance of 2 Kansas moms who were last seen driving through the Oklahoma Panhandle last month, including the grandmother of one of the women's children. Tadbert Cullum, Tiffany Michelle Adams, Cole Earl Twombly, and Cora Twombly were taken into custody on Saturday. The 4 were suspected of kidnapping and murdering Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly before they vanished on March 30th. The women were considered acquaintances as Kelly supervised Butler's visits with her children. The moms were traveling to Eva, Oklahoma to pick up Butler's children who had been living with their paternal grandfather, according to News Nation. Got it wrong. So, the way this hits me, being that I got it wrong, is this kind of is very much like what happened in Ohio some years ago. Remember when that family, like 8 or 9 people, were killed in 3 different homes? Remember that? And that was also a custody issue. I remember at the time, Web Sleuths, Reddit, all these Kookville and conspiracy land places sometimes anyway. We're all that, these 8, 9 members, they all got killed. It was the Mexican mafia that came up here because they were growing weed and everything, and they didn't want any competition, everything else. Of course, we eventually figured it out. It all had to do with custody arrangement. And, this is one of those things where I think I'm in a disadvantage. Getting back to the Q&A episode, like one of those questions, well, what's one of your happiest memories? I even stated, well, I've never been married and I don't have any kids, so I can't just default to one of those. So when it comes to custody stuff, and of course, the odds of me ever being involved in something like that are getting very getting to like Powerball jackpot odds at this point. So it's something maybe I just don't. I understand it can be very contentious, but the lengths that people will go to kill others regarding it maybe is still a little surprising to me. Although I will admit, going back to the Pike County, thank you, Cherie, Pike County, where those murders in Ohio happened, I never believed it was any sort of drug killing, though, either. I guess it surprises me that it had to do with custody battle, but I was thinking that it was probably done by people that they knew, but, I didn't know, and it was pulled off by just a few people. So this looks like the same thing. Now reading, I didn't put it in the article here, but of course, a lot's being written. A lot is being written about all of this now. That I guess the car was like really bloody and everything, and it was obvious. And I guess I read today that they have found now the women's remains. So I got it wrong last week, but I guess once again, just even going back to what I said about Dylan Rounds, getting that one wrong too, it continues this theme of, random encounters between strangers and victims is not a very common scenario when it comes to murders. It's just not. And, if it can happen something like this, I guess it can happen anytime. If we go back to the Pike County murders, if it can happen, 8, 9 people murdered in 3 different buildings, that, and those people that did that got away with it for a few years, then it's much more common than we could ever realize. And I think that kind of scares us because, here's what I think, whether it goes to the Pike County murders, which was a custody issue, or these murders of these 2 women, here's what I think I know. That when these children were conceived, when all these families started getting mixed together through dating and courting and fiancés and getting married or anything, nobody could have predicted that any of this would have happened. But it did. I think this is what is so, to me as a single person who is 99.9999% likely to never get married. This is what is so mind-boggling about people who get into long relationships and have kids and everything, that it can go so from one extreme to the other. All these people in the wedding pictures all smiling, then 5 years from now, they're killing each other. It is something. It is certainly something. So this is that. These people who killed these 2, of course, I realize Jillian was a kind of like the Ron Goldman in this situation. But, what do you think Veronica was thinking? She's going to pick up her kids, not suspecting anything's going to happen. And then she runs into these 4 who she knew. And she's standing there and she's like, oh, these people are going to kill me. Oh my gosh. Back when we were close, and even though we're in different families and, we share kids and all these things, these same people that just some years ago, we had a big dinner together and everybody got together and everybody was laughing and everything. Now these same people with that are now going to kill me. And you all wonder why I'm single. I mean, I know I'm smiling here, but it's one of those human things. It's, I realize in the animal world, we have insects, black widow spiders, they mate and then kill their mate and things. I don't know. It's so crazy. It's so scary. Let me see what everybody is. Carrie says, after reading former court docs, I nailed it that it was a grimy, gross grandma. Yeah, this, what was it? Tiffany Adams or Cora Twombly, one of them that's who you're talking about, Carrie. Yeah, Pike County. Thank you once again, Cherie. Hazel, Carrie, sorry to believe she thought they'd get away with it. Yeah, no James Bond masterminds in that group. I knew it was going to turn out that way in the missing mom's case. She truly thought she was above the law. Ferry says, unfortunately, some people still think children are a possession. Charlotte agrees with Ferry. The children's great-grandmother. Yeah, Markel's, Bradigan. Yeah, thank you, Cherie, for those names. She told authorities back in February about threats made. She reported that Tiffany had told her son Butler would be taken care of and this would all over soon. Blood outside of the car, Carrie says. Vanessa's glasses found outside of car. Gross, grimy grandma made threats directly to a judge. Eric's mother-in-law, her own son. Oh, yes, sure. Veronica was badly let down by authorities. She sure was. Yeah, agreed. Benefited another murder over custody. This benefited, agreed Charlotte. Slimy grandma, don't even like using word grandma. She doesn't deserve it. Wanted a second chance raising kids. Hazel says, Carrie, she knew of past threats upon her life. Every visit had to be terrifying. Yeah, maybe we should, look at it from that point of view. You get threats about you should take them seriously. This is one of those things. One of the channels that I watch is the Act of Self-Protection YouTube channel. I watch it every day. Shows a lot of videos of people being in gunfights and being attacked. And he goes through how to protect yourself, keep your heads on swivels, like I always say here, me and Shree and I both say. But it's one of those things, if somebody's going to threaten your life, you should take that person seriously. And, on act of self-protection, it's what they say there. Of course, a lot of these videos have people using guns in them. If somebody pulls a gun on you, you just take for granted that they are intending to use it. Now, of course, a lot of times that doesn't happen, but you have to get into that mentality. If somebody's pulling a gun on me, they're probably going to shoot me, so I'm going to have to fight for my life. That's just the way it goes. Just don't think that they're taking it out to just scare me. You're much better off thinking, this person's going to shoot me, so I better try to do something. So it's the same way with threats. If Veronica was getting threats, she should have taken them seriously. And why she thought that, really, what are we talking about here? Would it have been, I'm not being a sexist here or anything, but would it have really been every difference? Instead of her taking Jillian, she had taken a guy. Do you think the outcome would have been any different here? Probably not. Unless they're all carrying guns, and then it would have been one big shootout, I guess, out in that road. So just don't, it doesn't seem to me, as some of you have written, it just doesn't seem to me that Veronica had a complete understanding of this situation. She actually thought that just taking this, I guess maybe this woman had gone before, everything's going to be okay. And I just don't think you can do that. And maybe this, does it matter that she was 27? 27, you'd think you'd maybe understand these things by now, but it very well could be because she thought she knew these people. We used to be close, and then they're not going to do anything to me. They're not serious. Like I said, no matter who the person is, if somebody threatens your life, you should take it seriously. For all you women out there who might be in abusive relationships, and if your guy ever says to you, you know what, I could make you disappear, you are best off taking that seriously and getting the heck out. So, Lisa says, I'm sure you have a database, but here are my thoughts on most common missing reasons. Walked off or drove into a body of water, boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife. Number 3, walked off, lost the elements. Lisa, I will tell you, just knowing the stats off the top of my head, 60 to 65% of Unfound's disappearances, I believe to be murders. So there's that. Hazel did a bad job with Wrangler and just wanted the little ones for herself. All right, still talking about the grandmother. Jillian, wrong place, wrong time. Yeah. And what I would say to all of you is, if one of your friends ever asks you to go to a custody pickup for some of this, don't go. And you know what? Don't let them go either. Don't go, and don't allow that person to go either. It's not worth it. I realize, well, if I don't go, then I'm going to eat. It's not worth it. You can work it out down the road. But just today, on this particular day, if you've been threatened, and I know you want to go see your kids and get them back and everything else, you can work it out down the road. Don't go. Charlotte, I think this case is a cautionary tale for women to be more careful. Yeah. Yeah, Tiffany's grandma. Thank you, Thunderbird. Charlotte, she was probably scared something might happen. Tracy, I'm single because I watch too much true crime. Yeah, Tracy, some people are like that. Carrie, that's how much she wanted to see her children. Veronica begged law enforcement and courts to make pickup at police department. They all claimed it was a civil matter. Disgusting. Like I said, I'm still going to insist it's not worth it. You know, I realize that she wanted to see her kids. I get it. But the threats, that should be enough. And I get it. Police don't want to do anything. Then you don't do anything. You'll, once again, if you're dead, you can't work it out. If you're dead, you can't work it out. Yes, Carrie, the court and the authorities should take things more seriously. No. Hazel, Veronica, and the great grandmother kids had told law enforcement about threats. It was taken seriously, but she definitely wanted to see her kids. I know. I'm just going to keep saying the same thing. Missing mom's case ending in their murder, a failure at so many levels, which makes it all more infuriating. Hazel, Jillian was one of the court-ordered persons for the handover. That's why she went. That's a bad idea. What's she going to do? She knew, but she wanted to see her kids. Another tip, if you must have a meetup, use your local police. It doesn't sound like the police wanted to be involved, and that would be enough for me to just say, I'm not doing this. She has 4 people that supervised her visits. Real says, I'm single because I won't share the TV remote. You sound like my dad, the Real. Police station, I meant. And Boston, thank you. You are very generous. Good to see you, Boston. Where you been? Where have you been, Boston? I've missed you for these live shows. Good to see you. I realize it's a tough topic, but you got to take threats seriously. You get them on video. You get them on audio. You bring it to the police, and you just don't show up. And you keep recording and recording, and all these threats and everything else. And I tend to believe that eventually, you're thinking, it's one of those things, you're thinking too much about today. You're thinking, she wanted to see her kids. She's thinking too much about today. And I realize you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. We could die tomorrow and everything else. Where I would say you're thinking too much today about today. You might get killed today. You got to think these things through. You got to know that these choices are going to have consequences. And I continue to believe, once again, even though I'm not married, I don't have any kids, I tend to believe that all this stuff will get worked out eventually. It just isn't going to get worked out today. Also reading, the greasy, grimy attempted at Veronica's house, but couldn't get her out of her home. There are agencies where people can go for their visits. It very well may be, but on the other hand, it very well may be these 4 people would have killed anybody. Maybe they would have killed the police and everybody else. How far do we want to take this? I don't know. There was a previous attempt, so gutted the threats weren't dealt with harshly. Carrie, they did take it to police. That slimeball made a direct threat to the custody judge and nothing was done. And once again, Carrie, if Veronica knew that, she shouldn't have been anywhere near those people. I'm not blaming her, but I'm not blaming the victim, but we all have to make better choices. This goes back to when was it, last year, when that woman, she would always run at 5 a.m. and she got attacked and got murdered. And there's a thinking out there, well, women should be able to run at any time they want. And I agree with that. Women should be able to go out and run the streets of any city in the United States anytime they want. I agree with that. But when you do that, you take on a certain amount of risk. And you can't say that these women don't know that. I realize that. Until we have utopia in the United States, it's always going to be a dicey choice to do that. Men too. There have been men who've been shot while jogging, riding, getting bumped off of bikes on purpose and everything else as well. So I'm not blaming the victims here. There's enough facts out there to make better choices. Yeah. I understand what you're saying about choices, Hazel says. Yeah. I realize the judge at 24-hour security because of those threats. Yeah, the judge gets protection. Veronica doesn't. This is what a serious situation. I'd been too scared to go. Carrie, her children should never have been allowed around those people. I truly hope families of both women sue that county the highest allowable amount possible. Yeah. No. It's so weird. I for all of you, here's the way I perceive my country. That, I'm not going to, I can't speak for Australia, New Zealand, England, some other people, joining in the live show tonight. And I appreciate all of you non-Americans who tune in on Monday nights. I really appreciate it. It's not something that I could have ever imagined, way back when, that I would have the opportunity to talk to people all over the world like this. It's the more I do this podcast, though, if you don't know, for example, my perception, like I said, if my perception of my country is that, we've had the defund the police movement in many urban areas. And, of course, there's a lot of belief out there that police are racist and everything else. The weird part is, without a doubt, I get the craziest police stories, judge stories, crooked police, crooked judges, crooked sheriffs, and everything else from what we might call the hinterlands of the United States, not from the urban areas. Because, perception is that law enforcement is much more respected in what we might call the interior of the United States, getting away from the coasts, let's just say. And in the urban areas of the United States, police, there are people that want to defund them, and police are racist, and that's why a lot of minorities don't call the police when the crime happens, on and on. But the funny thing is that in those areas that I perceive where the police really respect law enforcement and back the blue and everything, that is where I get the craziest stories about how corrupt police and judges and everything and people are, and people in law enforcement are. It's really weird. And I'm thinking about this because I know that, there's been a couple disappearances that I've been working on. I don't know when they'll become episodes where this has come up. Where good people who I think are in a demographic that would really respect law enforcement, like to the point of being blind, maybe to their corruption and everything. They just have like the craziest cop stories. Sheriff's crooked, deputies are crooked. I guess we kind of ran into this with Tom Brown's disappearance, kind of. Maybe that was my first taste of it. So it's interesting here. We're talking about here what happened in Kansas and Oklahoma, in an area, once again, where I think, at least perceptually in our culture, we think, well, these people in those states, they really respect law enforcement and the rule of law and everything else. And then we have these people threatening judges. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it's amazing how much that happens. That, once again, if I'm going to use Tom Brown as an example, I think we could all now say that Nathan Lewis didn't have anything to do with Tom Brown's death. And I don't think Pine Gregory did, or anybody else like that, in my opinion. But still, and granted, we found out Nathan Lewis was not a good sheriff. We found out that Pine Gregory was not a good cop, on and on and on, surely. But once again, my perception of that area of Texas is they usually really do like law enforcement and everything. But man, they were so eager to Pile on those guys. It's just something interesting to watch. Whereas I don't think anybody would be surprised, if these kind of same things were happening in an urban area. The police are corrupt and they did this and ignored this disappearance and might have caused this disappearance and covering this up and covering that up. I've got none of that in any of the urban area disappearances that we've covered on Unfound. And I've covered, some in Tampa, in LA, New York City, Chicago, all over these places. Now we get claims that police didn't do what they should, and then they kind of let things slip through the cracks, didn't take things seriously, surely. But none of this talk about how the police are actually caused the disappearance or something. Get so much of that in the more rural areas of the United States. It is amazing. I should start keeping a statistic on that. Let's see. I'm almost done here. Yeah. Thunderbird says, I haven't heard either of the women's families speaking out. Don't know anything about that. Yeah, the mothers are speaking out. Carrie, if I was in that mom's position, I would probably felt so defeated. I would be willing to die to fight for my kids. Same with my grands. I get it. But it doesn't sound, unfortunately, like there was much of a fight, Carrie. And you're going to go down there, then you got to go down there heads on swivels, armed, and everything else. And probably not, once again, you got to live to fight another day sometimes. I realize emotions running high and everything else, but there has to be some rationality there. If we were mothers don't stand up for kids, I get it, Charlotte, but now she can't stand up for her kids at all. Yeah, Graham and her boyfriend were sovereign citizens. Yeah, that whole movement. Thank you for injecting that into there, Thunder. Thank you. I fought for my kids and grandkids for years. Good old boys club in small towns. Yeah, that's true. I don't, certainly there is maybe some proof of that. I just think it's overblown, but I continue to say my perception in the United States is people in rural areas are more likely to respect police and go along with them and everything else. But it's also where you get the craziest police stories. Easily. It's not even close. It's not even close. Lisa says, I would not be rational, unfortunately. The thing is, it's one of those things, once again, easy for me to talk. The kids need your emotions. They need your love and feelings, but they also need your logic too. They need both. Anything more? I'm not going to get to this young woman's story about how she ended up. I'm not going to get to this cop. Maybe just look this up. From Washburn, Maine, this cop who said he picked up this guy, Eric Foote, Foote. Speaking of crazy cop stories, once again, up there in Maine. Get the craziest stories. What it's reminding me a lot of are the disappearances of Terrence Williams and Felipe Santos, which happened a couple hours south of me by police officer Steve Calkins. He almost assuredly killed both of these guys. It's kind of giving me that kind of feeling, so maybe you want to look it up. Look up the disappearance of Eric Foote, Foote, from Washburn, Maine, and the cop's name is... let's see here. Where is it? Washburn Police Sergeant Chandler Cole. So if you want to Google that maybe I'll get to it next week. Maybe we'll have more developments by the time another week passes by. So maybe we want to look up that. And then I didn't get to talking about this young woman who went missing in LA. It seems like she's been found now, but she's not like giving out her location or anything. So her phone was found at LAX, but she wasn't there. All right, so finishing up tonight. Yeah, that's been it. This Friday is update episode number 17. So some of the things you heard tonight will be included in the episode. I think I have around 25 updates that I'll be doing. And I know what you're saying. Well, it's not the last Friday of April yet. Well, was supposed to do an interview yesterday, and the person backed out of it. And I should have mentioned that in the Q&A episode. You asked me, like, one of the worst parts about doing this podcast. I've talked about, not being taken seriously by law enforcement. This is the other part. People who say, you work for them, you do, you get everything prepared for them. Oh yeah, I want to do an interview, and then they blow you off. This happens more than any of you will ever understand. And still 7.5 years into this podcast, I'm still trying to figure out how, in a way, to get down on it happening. It still does. I can understand early in Unfound's existence. Well, I don't know about this Ed Denzel guy. 7.5 years in, it should not be an issue. So I'm moving up the update episode to this Friday, and then we'll just see what happens the last Friday of April. We'll have to figure out something. So update episode number 17. It's going to be long. Got a lot to talk about. Of course, you get to hear my voice by itself for another episode 2 weeks in a row. Sorry about that. Not necessarily my fault. So, Noah Lynch, that's the young woman. So everybody's talking there in the comments. All right, we're done here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It was good to see a couple of you that I hadn't seen in a while. Boston actress, Melissa, good to see some of you. The Real was even in here from Australia tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. And great discussion, OJ. Really a lot of comments and things. And remember, once again, thumbs up before you leave. Okay, thumbs up. Got to do it. Everybody have a great week. And please tune in this Friday for update episode number 17. Good night. Keep your heads on swivels. Charlie, say hi to the boys for me.